now. So tell me about your special event.
Well, the Altar of the Earth is a day-long ceremonial gathering learning event on how to work with our Mother Earth. It's the day before Mother's Day, and we have brought in 4 traditional, highly skilled earth workers who are able to really instruct us in pragmatic things about like how to make super fires, how to bless water, how to talk to trees, how to make herbs and cosmetics and medicines from flowers and coffee grinds, things like this. And this all arose from the permaculture work that I did with Skip Schuckmann, one of our presenters this summer, in which I literally saw him transform a landscape, transform the water flow, transform not just the way it works with compost and flowers and plants and trees, but the vibrational rate of it. So you really feel that like working with him is a way of kind of integrating into the total isness of everything. It became a spiritual practice. And I had no idea that you could do this much with such a seemingly ordinary space. So I really had the inspiration to offer it to the community, to bring in people who are expert and traditionally trained and can teach us things that we can take with us and use to become more connected to our mother.
That's fantastic. I think we really need that a lot today on a mass scale.
Agreed. You know, I hear a lot of complaints. I'm under the thumb of the consumer culture. All I do is pay bills and work. I can't, I don't have enough time. I can't catch up. That's one of the reasons for years I did my anti-career workshops to try to kind of show different ways of working that you don't have to be a complete wage slave. But can we learn things that can make us, it's not kind of an isolated self-sufficiency, but give us the expertise that we can do more and buy less, have more time and more breath, and really know who's living with us in terms of our water, our earth, our flowers, our trees. These are living beings.
Even the rocks, right?
Yes.
I love the rocks.
Oh my God, to hear Skip talk about rocks is unbelievable. One of the things he said because he was very explicit, when you're building pathways with rocks, you don't have a preconceived notion. You have to discover what he called the dendritic chain. The same as a spinal cord in the brain, all the, in the leaves, you have to find the pattern. But then I would notice, like the next day he'd be rearranging everything. And I said, well, tell me about this. And he said, well, the masons, the great stonemasons, they said, you have to move the rocks at least 3 times before they marry. And by doing this, it relieves the anxiety of having to get it right the first time. So it became like an ongoing project of meditation, work, art, all rolled into one. Right. And that's what we're offering on Saturday.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And you mentioned that you have known Evan for a long time. So tell me about how you selected the guests that will be presenting.
Yeah, well, I've known Evan for decades. I was with him when he first brought the Micmac Sweat Lodge to the Hudson Valley. This is over 20 years ago. So Evan has been one of the primary, I would call him spiritual activists and transmitters of Native American culture. All his books, No Word for Time, Native New Yorkers, really special. And I have gone around the Hudson Valley with Evan, and he'd point out different places where settlements were, where tribes were. He knows all the different layers of even back to the mastodons. It's quite something. So I felt Evan Chipmunk, which is his Native American name, Pritchard, had to be there. Then Blossom Woman, Johanna Guarucheanao was the Taino pipe carrier who taught me how to pray with tobacco. And I was skeptical because I know lots of people who make a lot of stuff up, and you know, she's very traditional, and you have to do it this way and do it this way. And not that this is the reason, but I have to say, when we did this prayer with the tobacco, I got so high. I said, what's in that tobacco? Nothing. It's in the prayer. So she is coming to teach the traditional tobacco ceremony, as well as how to make medicines and cosmetics from lavender, coffee grinds, sage, all things which we have on the property. Right. And she also knows the chants for rain and fire in their actual language.
That's so awesome.
And I know all this because a number of years ago, when Evan did a medicine wheel ceremony at my place, she came and did the songs. And then I mentioned Skip, who he's a permaculture guru. He worked for years at the Ojai Foundation in California, which is where Krishnamurti used to come, and basically taught them how to keep fires, how to build fences. I have seen this guy clear a field of poison ivy with his bare hands. He's like Daniel Boone, you know. I've seen him, I'm not exaggerating, I've seen him move tree trunks. He was working in my garden this summer carrying these giant stones, and he's a little guy with a long beard, looks like an elf, looks like a hobbit. And he describes himself as a mud person, and he digs deep in the ground and let's see what's under. And one of his great quotes is about, he said, our ancestry is everywhere. You know, let's just look under our feet. And as part of the permaculture credo, we bought one thing. The only thing we bought all summer was a very small pump for the waterfall. Everything else, every piece of stone, everything was found on site.
That's amazing. So
Skip's going to share permaculture, Johanna Blossom Woman, the tobacco ceremony and making medicines. Evan is going to do talking to trees and an outdoor medicine wheel. Skip will also do working with fire. And I felt it would not be complete, since we are in Poughkeepsie, to have Poughkeepsie's own dreaming goddess, Rhianna Mirabello, do the water ceremony, which she gladly agreed to do. So we're bringing in these people, and the idea is to spend an intense day learning how we can be better earth keepers, earth sharers, and walk on the earth with a little more beauty and freedom and sharing with all our beings.
Maybe a little more softly. We can walk a little
more softly. Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm hoping that I can get down to Poughkeepsie for the event.
Hey, we're here. You know, Skip, like for example, he frowned when he first came to my yard at my compost bin. Yeah, I thought I was being progressive because I had a compost bin. He said, no bins, you know, everything is on site. He says, dig a hole here, you know, put the stuff here and let's see what happens and let it cook. Right. And so really working, you know, one of his dictums is you don't throw anything out. There's a place for everything in the garden, the so-called weeds, the so-called extraneous things, they all have a place. And indeed, once we started working, the animals showed up. And many years ago, when Rhianna was doing this conference called AkashaCon in Poughkeepsie, there was I believe it was a couple talking about, quote, like conscious homesteading. Mm. And they were talking about bringing the spirits back into the land. And being the academic skeptic I can be, I said, well, how do you know that the spirits are back on the land? And it was a beautiful answer. They said, when the water started running again, when the fox returned, when we started getting glimpses of the bear, when the birds started making their nests, we knew the spirits had come back.
That's great. I'm just thinking about all the animals. I've been seeing so many animals here, so that must be good tidings for us here in our little neck of the woods, like a bear, raccoon this year, fox, bobcats. In the past I've seen coyotes, but and a rabbit. I always watch the rabbits. and the squirrels. I'm always trying, especially the past year. I really mostly connect with just the animals. I don't really connect with people as much. I'm trying to now. Now I'll start reconnecting with people.
Yeah, that's why I used to love when in the towns in India where I lived for many years. They're towns. They're not rural, but all the animals are there. The occasional elephant, cows, donkeys, of course, dogs and cats, and camels. And it's this, the monkeys, an extended community.
Fantastic. Yeah, that would be awesome. And so now I watch the birds all the time. I'm always looking for the birds and listening and trying to listen more, and trying to work with more of my senses with everything here and the trees. I love to hear about talking to the trees.
Yeah, it took me years. I've been living on this property. Let's say, how old is my daughter? 18, for 18 years. And it took me about 15 years to realize I have a giant cedar tree and how important this can be to people. It wasn't until I had Native American teachers here say, hey, you have a cedar tree. Do you know that? And I began to, to really listen and work with the trees.
Interesting.
And the interesting thing with Skip's work is it's not romantic. It's not airy-fairy. He can be brutal. Like he taught me, you can get rid of 2/3 of this tree and it will be healthier. How to really prune stuff and really understanding how life and death are completely interactive and not separate.
Right.
That in itself is worth everything to me.
And I just love the idea of, learning more about all of this, because it is, like you're saying, it's all interconnected. But I think the way that, I have come up is, you're conditioned very differently, to be you're not a part of nature, when we really are,
Yeah. And this is, I would argue, there is an emerging paradigm on the planet that is challenging this Cartesian notion of separation of subject and object, or of man and nature. So you have everyone from neuroscientists,
right,
to Taoists, to Native American medicine people, herbalists, just teaching that hey, we're part of the band, but there's a whole band here, and can we play with them?
It's such a your life becomes so rich when you start to pay attention to these subtleties. It becomes, because I felt the 6 years when I was doing that reporting, and I also went to grad school, and I had cancer twice. So I was burning the candle at both ends, but of course, these are the wake-up calls that we send ourselves, and so I've shifted my ways, and
hopefully they're wake-up calls.
Right.
Not for us only as individuals, but for our entire culture. We're getting a lot of wake-up calls, and
yes,
we do have the potential to engage them, but we also have the potential, to do otherwise. And I just see this kind of work as honoring those wake-up calls. Like in my own case, I think I told you before, I would not have gone out and worked with Skip all summer and learned the permaculture if I hadn't had what I call my heart event.
Right.
Which kind of, I had to really cut back and just be with things. And my God, what a blessing.
Right. Well, so that kind of happened for me because I went through, the breast cancer was in 2012, and but I never really recuperated from that, and it wound up, and it took a long time to figure it out, but I had an H. pylori colonization in my stomach, which led to ulcers and multiple lymphoma. So, but I find that interesting because that's a bacteria, so that's part of the earth as well. So I just feel like I was out of balance.
Yeah, there's a really interesting book out there that I saw. It's the title is Eat Dirt. And, some MD, but his basic, theory is that the bacteria on the plants can be very good for us. And being too sanitary can be just as problematic as not being sanitary at all.
Right.
I learned from my friends who work with the Peruvian shamans to see illness not as something to be conquered or as this terrible misfortune,
Right.
but kind of like a time in the womb, a time of recapitulation, getting ready to be reborn.
Right. Right.
Jung had a great quote. He said, "The gods have become diseases." Because for many people, that's the only thing that overrides the ego.
Right. Right.
Well, yeah. But I'm telling you, getting out with these people, working on the land and just seeing everything that's possible, it kind of puts your own life into another perspective.
Right. I agree. It's it was being taken out of ordinary time. I felt like
Right. Exactly.
Because I was so fatigued. I had kind of come through the second radiation, but and during this time, I was working for a corporation, news corporation here in Connecticut, but the corporation had been sold 3 times during this period. So I had 6 different insurance companies too, and nobody knows what's going on with health insurance.
Like mortgage companies, they
Right.
sell games, yeah.
Right. So, and you have to advocate for yourself, because if you're in a private corporation, you don't have an advocate inside that corporation. You have to be out there while you're sick advocating for yourself. So it was too much. So I guess it was just time for me to just, pull the shades down for a while. I had had so much input over those number of years. So I just needed to absorb, I think.
People forget because we didn't read that in the Buddha story, when he's just on the edge of enlightenment and he's challenged by Mara, the god of death, who basically says, "Who the hell do you think you are to get past me?" His answer is nonverbal. He taps the earth. It's like, I belong here. That's been reverberating throughout history.
Right.
Hopefully things like this are little steps to getting back what we've given up.
Right. I think it's so fascinating. It's like there's just so many levels here, and everybody's on different levels, and it's like this big hall of mirrors. And then, it takes you half your life to, if you're lucky, you can conquer your ego, right, before you're 40 or so, right? And then you still have to deal with your subconscious or your ancestral stuff. And there's so much invisible. There's so much that's invisible that's impacting us. And if you're only connecting to the material world, you're not going to find anything there, So it's a fascinating journey. And I just really appreciate being able to listen just in nature.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hoping that it can teach me something.
And, I don't, for me, the Hudson Valley has always been something very special energetically.
It's gorgeous.
In my, quote, younger days, I had an opportunity. I was still an adjunct professor at Vassar, and I got a tenure track offer in Orange County, California.
Wow.
And I said no. I said, because I want to be in the Hudson Valley.
It's gorgeous there.
It's very profound, this place. And, the river that flows both ways, as it is called, according to our geologists, is a mere 450 million years old, talking about the layers.
Right.
When Skip and I were digging in the earth in my backyard, we found seashells, animal bones, wedding rings, the history of the planet. So I think something about getting these beings on our side, as opposed to seeing them as inimical, can really help our integrative process.
Exactly. I think it's pretty fascinating when you talk about all of creation too, and so the stones were here first, right, and then the plants, and how they have so much more intelligence than than we do.
Yeah, I still can't figure out how 3 or 4 herbs have showed up in my garden, which are really the herbs that this body needs. And I did not plant them. I'm kind of amazed at this.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Did Skip have any comment on that, or?
I don't remember if you had any comment on that particular.
All right, that's interesting.
But he was very and is very, what's to say, I had this giant tomato that, I had a tomato that was about the size of a cantaloupe. And it was so awesome and so beautiful. And I said, Skip, I don't know what to do with this. It's so wonderful. It's so, and he looked at me and he said, the greatest honor you can do to another living being may be to eat it.
That's interesting.
Very interesting.
Raymond Tarby was talking about how the plants sacrifice themselves. They just, there's no hunt. They just give themselves, So, and that we need to learn how to sacrifice ourselves, right?
Yeah, and the plants have also learned how to get their sustenance without going to work every day.
Yes.
And there's something to learn from that, because we've created this illusion that we think working hard is justifying our life, is what we need to do, is the only way to survive. But the plants are showing us, look, we're a little smarter. We figured out how to receive energy from the sun and the water.
Right.
Why, is that so impossible for humans? Or is it just that we've limited ourselves to an idea of what humanity is? And I really see, what humanity can be is so far expanded than what we are.
Yeah.
Thank goodness there's evolution.
I hear talking, a lot of talk about how the planet's ascending, or, different things about the dimensions and the energy and the vibration and the frequency. And what do you have to say about all that kind of stuff?
I'll tell you one thing. I say one thing. If anybody asks me, following a mentor of mine, the Kabbalistic visualization teacher, Jerry Epstein, if anybody asks me anything about prophecies or what's going to happen, I say, I can't answer that. And they say, why? I say, because it's against the 4th commandment. The 4th commandment says, thou shalt not bear false witness.
Gotcha.
So, I have no doubt that we are discovering the multidimensionality of the cosmos. I have no doubt that the vista of vibratory realities around us is infinite. Mm-hmm. But I'm also very aware of the ego creates dramas so it doesn't have to be present. Mm-hmm. And so my feeling is I work at being as present as possible, and then what she wants to show me, she will. Yes. Right. And everybody gets their own, we say in the India Darshan, everybody gets their own vision, so everyone has their own contribution. Right.
It's really interesting, isn't it? This whole experience here.
But I go back to the first chakra. Can you, first chakra says, can you support yourself? Can you live on the earth with, and survive? Or do you have to go hundreds of miles away to do that? So by learning what's on your own land and who was here before and how people survived before, right, you're empowering that first chakra, and survival becomes less of a burden and just more natural. Right. Then you can move to feeling and focus and expansion and all the rest.
Right, exactly.
Which is why I like Findhorn, in Scotland, because they had the angels, they had the devas. They were communing with these beings of higher frequencies, but the result was that they grew giant vegetables, and they grew them on a garbage dump, more or less. So, I want to see that embodied. Can you embody that?
Right.
That's really speaking to me. That's what the Altar of the Earth is about. That's, can we embody all these ideas?
Right.
live with dignity and live,
I like, I did read one book by Penny Pierce called Frequency, and and it might have been some of that which gave me, a lead on. I saw a list of different emotions, and there's a vibrational frequency attached to it. So that to me made sense in my mind, and I like to think about ways to transmute or transcend, or what the antidote is if I have,
in the Mahayana Buddhist world, they speak about one realm. They're called lokas, which we usually translate as a world, but it's a vibrational realm, a frequency, where the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, are transmitted through fragrance alone.
Wow.
So the frequency of the flowers, that's very significant. And the frequency of the tea you're drinking, and like what's in the water.
Right.
These are all, affecting us tremendously. But, we get busy.
I like the idea of when I was learning a little bit about that, when they were talking about what the fourth dimension is, or the fifth dimension might be, where, we're just collaborating and cooperating, and you experience joy, and it's all these higher, if we could get everybody to that level, I don't know, is that how it works? You have to, or we just do it in pods, and then somehow, because of the fractals, whatever we're doing will impact the whole, correct?
Yes. I'm into the microcosm.
Yes.
If I can do it in my backyard,
That's where I'm at, exactly.
That's my contribution.
Right.
And then if enough people do it in their this is not just romantic fantasy. During the, I guess you call it revolution, what was the exact word? When the Polish people rebelled against the Soviet Union, there's a word for it. But during that time, I used to go to Poland a lot to work, and turns out the reason that the Poles were able to sustain a revolt against this giant, regime was because of their tradition of family farms. Every family had, the dacha. Every family had sustenance. So they weren't dependent on the central control of markets by the, socialist government. So it really is true that the pods can greatly influence the whole.
Right. And it's true, as we're, some of the reporting that I was doing, it was interesting what you were seeing with some efforts in Middlesex County, where these small towns were having efforts to strengthen the local resilience. And it was just a matter of people knowing other people, really, and what their skills were and how they could utilize that. And I don't think we see enough of that, today. I've moved a lot. I grew up in the Hudson Valley. I wish I had learned at that time more of the American Indian heritage that, belongs to all of us.
Right.
And then I lived up in central Vermont for 7 years, and then came down here to Connecticut. So a lot of beautiful rivers, but I have to say I always miss the Hudson. And what is the name of the Hudson, the original name?
Well, Evan can pronounce it.
Right.
I don't want to butcher it, but it's translated as the river that flows both ways.
Right.
Because of the fact that it's an estuary. You have from the Atlantic Ocean flow and from the North flow, and they kind of meet and mingle, salt and fresh water. So this is known as, Skip was showing me this summer about the ecotone, which is, the ecotone is the place where two different systems meet. Like where your strawberry patch meets, the weeds or the mold territory. And he was like showing me this summer how to experiment, how to really use the ecotone as this place of amazing creativity, because here's where the new can emerge, where you can open to the best of both worlds and have a new kind of emergence.
Right.
And as you probably don't know, but I am, academically an expert on India and Indian religions. I've studied a lot about Indian culture, which is older than American culture by a few thousand years. But what happened in ancient India is that there was an ecotone. There was a meeting of indigenous cultures with invading armies from the north, known as the Indo-Aryans. And they had different languages and different structures. And initially, in what we call the Vedic period, the Aryan consciousness prevailed. But as time went on, the teachings of the earth percolated upward until, for example, today, all the very major gods in India, Shiva, Krishna, the Devi, they were all pre-Aryan gods. So they percolated upward, and there's been a beautiful melange, and I see the Americas has the potential to move in this direction. There's just such an amazing melange of peoples and trajectories and histories, and I love, it just resonated with me greatly many winters ago when Buckminster Fuller, inventor of the geodesic dome, visionary architect, who spent the last, 15, 20 years of his life trying to figure out how to feed the world. His mantra was, quote, the human race is destined to succeed. And I just said, yes, I bought that.
Right.
I bought that.
Raymond Tarpey said that we're helped. That, I think that, so we get these injections of information, or there's disclosures or whatever, but I think that we're helped, and I think the creator's on our side, right?
And I'm working at Vassar with 18 to 20-year-olds. And I asked them just last week in a class, about 20 students, I said, how many of you have had an experience in your life where something or someone helped you in such a way that you couldn't imagine how it happened, but because of it, you may be alive today? And 2/3 of them, at least almost 3/4 of them, raised their hand.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, we are helped.
Yeah.
Angeles Arian, who passed a few years ago, used to do a lot of ancestral work on the West Coast, Basque shamanic anthropologist. She used to say, your ancestors are unemployed. They're waiting for you to give them work. They're just waiting for you to call them in. So
that's interesting. Yeah. I did a little bit of work with a shaman on doing family constellations here in Connecticut. It's fascinating, It really is, that quantum field, and it's very healing, Yeah. So, well, I would love to talk more. Is there anything else that we that you might have missed in talking about the event? It's the 12th, right? May 12th?
May 12th is, very clearly the day before Mother's Day. Rain or shine, we'll have tents if it rains.
Right.
But really, for me, the greater agenda has always been, how can I and my fellow beings, how can we reharmonize ourselves with the divine?
Right.
And I don't think we can do that by disavowing the land we live on.
Right.
And being a city boy, and growing up in it took me a long time to really understand that indeed it's not just what's over our head, it's what's under our feet.
I was reading who wrote the song Moon Shadows? Is that Cat Stevens?
Cat Stevens, yeah. Yusuf Islam, yeah.
And I listened to that recently and looked up the story, and he had grown up in a city, and it was the first time that he saw his shadow from the moon. So it's fantastic.
It's funny that you bring him up, because I have a little harmonium. I play music every morning, and recently, for some reason, I've been playing his, Morning Has Broken every morning. But the thing that occurred to me, I said, the song was gifted through him.
Right.
And it belongs to everybody.
Yes.
The culture of ego consciousness, put your name up on a wall, give you a royalty, but in fact, it belongs to everybody.
That's what I feel like. I feel like we're channels.
Yeah.
We don't possess the gifts that we are channeling. But that Moon Shadow song keeps popping up in my head. And I did, when I was in New York, when we came home from Poughkeepsie that day, we stopped at the, there's a little rest stop where you can buy New York products.
Uh-huh.
And this is the Midnight Garden Mix.
Oh, wow.
It's a Valley Seed Company.
Awesome.
So yeah, I think that'll be a lot of fun to have out here on my deck. And I love to look at the moon now. You know, as I've been coming along this year, I'm tuning in much more to the sun, to the moon, to all the weather. And
you know, I remembered years ago, I read this amazing statement about the weather from a psychologist named, I believe his name was R.L. Bulk, who wrote about Walt Whitman. He did like a psychological study of Walt Whitman. And he said, Whitman never complained about anything, not even the weather. And, you know, when I heard that, I just said, that's it. I'm going to stop complaining about the winter. I'm going to embrace it, you know, and it really changed my life.
Yeah.
You know, people, you know, the new age, what should we call it? Not propaganda, but rhetoric, you know, have an attitude of gratitude, you know, people, yes. When you get your hands dirty out there, you know, it just how you see it, like, wow, you know, I'm part of this whole, oh my God, you know, and a lot of the toxic ambition dissolves. And being here becomes so much more than enough.
Right.
Like, wow, why didn't I ever see this before? I
love the idea. Evan was talking about the Trinity of the Father Sky. Is it or is it the Earth was the mother? Yes, the Earth is the mother, right? The Father, and then you know we're the child in that Trinity, and I think that's the that feeling of innocence that we need to get back to. The joy that we have, that simple joy, and before the ego and the systems and everything else kind of take residence, you know?
And really understanding that we are not independent. We are interdependent.
Yes.
It's as clear as anything. And that's the subtext here, to kind of move our culture toward the greater embrace of our interdependency.
Right. I think, you know, I've been expressing a lot of love to water. I think water needs a lot of love. And I said to Evan, I know it sounds selfish, but my shower is my favorite part of the day.
When I was in Oroville in India, you've probably heard about this, but they were experimenting having mantras chanted into water and then looking at the molecular structure.
Right.
And seeing how different mantras really change molecular structure.
I've seen those kind of studies.
Yeah, isn't it incredible?
It really is.
Yeah.
So we know that our thoughts can change matter.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. So I really appreciate you taking time to talk.
Yeah, very nice meeting. And
yeah, and I hope we can talk again. I'll follow up with, let me turn this.
Humanity has been on an epic journey of discovery, learning the truth about the world we live in. New discoveries about the true origins of humanity, ancient history, free energy, as well as the systematic corruption of world governments are now on the forefront of our daily reality. Is the world headed towards destruction based on control and power? Or is an opportunity now being presented to shift and uplift into a higher consciousness? My name is Mel V, co-founder and creative director of Conscious Consumer Network, an independent broadcast network that was launched on the 1st of January 2015. In the last 3 years, Conscious Consumer Network has broadcast over 2,800 shows in multiple languages, featuring guests from across the world, whilst creating media that is aimed at the creation of a free, fair, peaceful, just, sustainable world. Conscious Consumer Network provides full training and an interactive support network for all broadcasters, and we are always looking for inspiring and educational content.
Hi, this is Lainey Liberty.
And this is Miro Siegel.
In 2018, Conscious Consumer Network has expanded to multiple broadcast locations, increasing our availability and reach across the world, remaining on the cutting edge of independent media. If we wish to create a better world, we must first create better media, geared towards real education instead of indoctrination.
You guys really are what changing the world is going to be about. It's educating kids at a grassroots level.
Having become a pillar of stability in the turbulent world of independent media, we have even more going on in 2018. Conscious Consumer Network is a publicly funded network, and we rely on all of you to keep us on the air. Show your support for independent media by donating to our 2018 Network Support Fund. Dare to seek a better world. Support independent media.